Welcome in to Come Get Some. I'm your host, Blake Williams, here with Mr. Come Get Some himself, Gregg Williams. And I know it was a heartbreaking way for the Browns season to end. It was a shocking for us all. We've got a big show for you today, and part of it, obviously we're going to be heavily getting into kind of what happened on the Browns debacle, before getting into some recap of the other wild card games. And there's a lot of inclement weather going on that just so happens to be going on in these games. So talking a little bit about some inclement weather games of G-Dub's past and what that's like playing in those. Also talk some coaching carousel and give out some game balls. But G-Dub, before we get into all of that, right, so a surprise end of the season for the Browns. So take us through a little bit of end of the season protocol in the NFL and kind of what your protocol was from last meetings with the players, exit meeting days, cutting the staff loose for a little bit, just in general January in the NFL when you're not still playing, what that's like.
Well, day after the game, you bring them in. They're cleaning out lockers and all that stuff, and you have a team meeting, and the head coach is going to talk about different types of things that he thinks is important that the team hears to end the season, and we break them into the coordinator meetings and then break them down into position meetings. And the things that I've always been very strong about was making sure everybody understood, that we had a really good year. We got to the playoffs, but it's not good enough. It's not good enough in professional football unless you are able to hold that trophy up at the end, and just like we've done before in our past and everything, and you got to be able to do that. And this is a 362-day-a-year job, and everybody needs a little bit of break, and I'll talk to them about their break, and then getting right back into things that we will identify, we will talk about that needs improvement, from physically to mentally to schematically to technique-wise, the things that they need to be working on before we all get back together to start the next journey. The other thing is that with some of the guys, some of the important people, we've got to talk about contracts. And then in the individual meetings and stuff, I make sure that position coaches and in me, I identify as a coordinator or head coach certain guys that will have specific meetings one-on-one with me as we go through some of the contract situations and stuff. But it's a short time of the year. It's necessary. Coaches will get a week, maybe 2 weeks off to regroup and be ready to roll. But then we've got to hit the ground running, getting into free agency and preparing for the draft.
I think that's going to be such an interesting thing, obviously around here in Cleveland is being over the cap right now, but they're really good at managing that. But who's going to be re-signed, who's going to be let walked, and who's going to be signed and or drafted, to get them over that hump, next year, right? But there's some big time free agents that they've got to figure that out with, to make the leap to the next level. But hey, stick right with us, because when we get back, we're going to talk about that heartbreaking loss in Houston from the Browns. Welcome back in to Come Get Some. And I know a lot of the Browns fans and a lot of Ohio sports fans are here with heavy hearts. This week, a really rough and a really shocking end of the season. Really shocked by the way that game went, Now, I will say this, though. I mean, you called it, G-Dub, which, in our show last week on saying, what the three keys to victory, which the Browns had to do in not turn the ball over, no drops, and then more importantly, no explosive play touchdowns. And that's really what this game came down to, wouldn't you say? I mean, were you surprised? Were you surprised by the performance?
Yes, I was. And, one of the things I wanted to do was get on the phone with Andrew Berry and tell him to start putting up the things that I say back in the team meeting again, so everybody hears this every single day. The fact that the ball was turned over, but turned over that put points on the board, have 2 of those in the same game. It's hard to win the game when you turn the ball over once and they turn it into a touchdown, but 2 and a couple of the drop passes, that was just, unbelievable. And then a couple of the bust and not being in the right area of the fields and the framework of some of the explosive plays that were not gadget crazy, goofy looking plays. They were every down plays that Lions have been doing all year long that turned into explosive touchdowns. You can't have those and win a playoff game.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt, and you hit those offensive things right there, and frankly, it all adds up, it all stacks up. But I mean, I watched a game, me personally, where I don't know that the pick sixes in the grand scheme of things was going to change the course of the game, right? From the standpoint of it was an explosive, point-producing fest by C.J. Stroud and Bobby Slowick. And that offense, and they pulled people, and they pulled they took the reins off at the end, kind of like the Browns did the previous game, versus Houston a month ago. And so I just didn't see. Talk a little bit about this. Talk a little bit about the body language, like when I knew when I knew in the game that it was probably going to go south the wrong way because I could see it in the players' eyes. Some of the players that were repeatedly giving up the plays in coverage, right? And you just see the shrinking body language, and you see the look. So, talk a little bit about that, what you saw from that standpoint.
How many times have you sat in a meeting in your life before you started coaching, even as a player, and listened to me talk about being a body language expert? And we have a sudden change philosophy, and we have a philosophy about how I pinpoint down to what your body language is telling every single person out there, your teammates, the importance, and all that, and the offense taking a look at you too. They know when you start shrinking away from tough times. They know when you start shrinking away from the confidence that needs to be played with. That was awful, and it drove me nuts, and I know you saw it, and I saw it too.
Another thing on that, and something that I don't think has been talked about, enough out there. I really haven't seen anybody bring it up, but this is what was just from the opening drive, seeing what Bobby and them were doing on offense. I was like, this could be an issue, because they were doing things that I would do. Not saying I'm, this offensive genius, but I would do from my knowledge of Jim Schwartz, right? And so the Jim Schwartz is, for the fans out there that don't know, his number one protege, say the number one person that he is grown, taught, taken with him places as a defensive guy, grown up through the ranks, been his coordinator, been a coordinator at some other places in the league as well too, but always running Jim Schwartz's scheme, is Matt Burke, who's the defensive coordinator down there at the Houston Texans. And then the rest of that group, D'Amico and Bobby and those guys that all came from the 49ers, right? The 49ers are running Jim Schwartz's scheme as well too, taught to him by Schwartz and taught to him by the great D-line coach out there at the 49ers, Chris Kasurk, who played defensive line for Jim Schwartz, and then also grew up through the coaching tree with him, probably his number 2 protege, Chris Kasurk. And so what I saw was just in a high level of knowledge of not only how to attack Schwartz's schemes, on how to do things on the edges, to condense the edges and all sorts of little chips and harassments and eye candy and stuff like that to mess with and try to slow down Miles and that group on the edge to not let them, be a factor, right? And then some things to mess with man coverage and some quarter coverage things, and then probably a little bit of psychology there of knowing that Jim's not gonna adjust, so to say. I mean, or not have not take in just a huge play call list like you would, or like Buddy would, or something like that. There's not going to be a ton of curveballs if things are going south. And I saw them have a really detailed understanding, obviously kind of a behind the scenes understanding of Jim and this defense, and they really
showed me.
Yeah, they picked that scab.
It showed me in a scouting report that I do on every coach that's out there that I get a chance to evaluate. It elevated Bobby Slowick's evaluation from me by picking the brains of those people. You have to check your ego. You don't know everything. We don't know everything. Find out from hand signals to structures of words, calls, hand signals, all that kind of stuff. But you know what? Bobby did a good job on some of those man beaters. You and I have been through every single one known to man. This is the most man-to-man coverage Jim Schwartz has ever played in all the different stops he's had, because he's got good man-to-man people. But some of the stack formations and some of the motion alignments and stuff gave them fits, and they also had some fake scouting report things on where the receivers were nodding and over-nodding certain routes to get the Browns to jump them and then go the opposite direction. And you know how I think about cover 4. It pisses me off even talking about cover 4. We got rid of that a long time ago because everybody loves that.
There was a lot of issues. There was people, there was man-to-man deficiencies, and there was routes, where they knew they were getting man-to-man and they were attacking, picking the guy that they wanted to pick on.
Picking the guy they wanted to. That's right.
And then there was just a lot of like eyes violations things. I mean, at times when Schwartz would try to switch to quarters, or he would try to switch to cover 2. I mean, CJ Stroud missed that touchdown on the 3rd and long.
Yep.
Where our rookie safety just squatted staring in the backfield and hey, it's 3rd and extra long, and you're like, why do you think Jim Schwartz is calling cover 2?
No doubt.
And what do you think they're going to do right here, right? And he just squats and sits and staring at the quarterback, and the dude just runs right through the top.
He would have been
defense.
selling beer for me.
So, yeah, I mean, it was a rough one, from that standpoint, but it was interesting. I mean, honestly, it reminded me of some of the games that we had, like the Texans reminded me of some of the games we had at the Saints, where it was, I mean, I'm just being real. Like it was knowledge of the other team.
Yep.
Out schemed, out coached, but then the players being like out techniquing. I mean, the players on Houston on both sides of the ball played with a phenomenal technique, and then just out physical. I mean, I'll tell you this: the Houston Texans defense. You would have thought the Houston Texans defense was the Browns defense, or the number 1 defense in the league. They rose up and played so fast, so hard, so technically sound, so physical.
And weren't apologizing for being physical. I agree.
Honestly, I was really impressed by this as well too. Like Stefanski, there was a number of plays that Stefanski called to like hard plays to attack the exact defense that the Texans are in.
Yep.
And like 90% of the time, like it's a little like man beaters. Think about the low red zone one.
Yeah,
Remember the low red zone?
Yes,
and they perfectly executed, and they had the throwback play, come back across, and they played with perfect eyes. A number of those man beater screens that they did on the day, like they were all over it, perfect eyes. You talk about the pick six, the second pick six with the or maybe it was the first one with the linebacker.
The second
one. The classic of a flat foot read.
Yep.
Squat, flat foot read, and break,
Not only
it was
did he
textbook.
Flat foot, he leaned inside and told him, I'm staying inside, and boom, undercut that and was gone.
Hey, no doubt. I mean, it was just one of those games. It was a quicksand type game, and the Browns couldn't get out of it. But hey, on to another year, and hopefully a better year next year. Hey, but stick right with us, because when we get back from this, we're going to talk inclement weather and some of your famous inclement weather games.
Been through them.
Welcome back into Come Get Some. I'm your host, Blake Williams, here with Mr. Come Get Some himself, Gregg Williams. And we are here in Burke Lakefront Airport on the shores of Lake Erie in Cleveland on a frigid 9-degree day. It's been a crazy inclement weather day. Actually, I mean, I think you saw, and my younger brother Chase was going viral, with his video over the weekend, on social media and everything. He lives out in Colorado, where it was negative 11 degrees, and he took his daughters, right, like my nieces, your granddaughters, were complaining about not being able to go outside and go play the playground. He was trying to explain to them, so he formulated an experiment. And he took a bowl of ramen that he was eating, and he took it outside and held the fork up like this, and after 15 seconds, he just let go of the fork, and the bowl of ramen was frozen, and the fork was frozen, floating up.
Unbelievable.
And he's like, this is why we can't go out and play it. They were like, all right, they're whatever, 8 years old and 4-year-old twins, and they're like, okay, we could get that, we could comprehend that. It's pretty cool.
I get it now.
But speaking of inclement weather games, and I saw funny enough, they moved the Bills game, and I've seen where they intentionally didn't shovel the snow.
I saw that too.
Only out of the opposing teams, so Pittsburgh Steelers fan sections. So most of the stadium is cleared of snow, and then there's this like little window where it's like they sell the tickets or give the tickets to the opposing fans, right? Yeah. And there's like 2 feet of snow, and people are having to dig out their own chairs. I love that home field advantage,
changed
man.
Since we've been there. That's great.
But speaking, I mean, you saw in Kansas City as well too. You saw it's so cold, honestly, that Patrick Mahomes' helmet shattered.
Yep.
And it brought me back to the thoughts of, where I'm going with this, of James Burgess' helmet.
Yes.
When he had those 20 tackles and, I don't know, 2 sacks and whatnot, and knocked Leonard Fournette out of the game when we played the Jaguars
down there.
here in 2017 in the cold and the snow.
Yes.
And his helmet looked like a shattered eggshell after that game. But talking about inclement weather, how would you prepare for either games that you were expecting to be heavy rain games or heavy snow games? Like how would you guys go about practicing for it, and how would you guys go about like adjusting in game?
The big thing was the grip of the football. And so trying to do.
And you were a quarterback, and so you know
how hard it is to throw a wet ball, catch a wet ball, all that type of stuff. And so we would do that, in snow games and in rain games. But interesting as we go back and start talking about them, just like that game down there, and we played the very first game in the history in Mexico City.
Yeah, in 94 exhibition game. I remember that exhibition game. It was the Houston Oilers versus the Dallas Cowboys.
Yep.
It actually set the all-time attendance record, for an NFL game with like 115,000 or something like that fans.
124,000, but there's really they lost track. There was like 40,000 people that just came on in anyway. It was over 100.
It was in that soccer
in a big old soccer
stadium
and all that.
And talk about that one a little bit. I mean, it was a rainy game. What I remember of this is I remember Gary Brown, the running back for the Houston Oilers, your running back, like planting, and no joke, I mean probably 1 yard chunk, a 1 yard, so 3 foot by 1 foot chunk of turf. When he tried to plant, just like went flying, like it was a sheet of grass.
9 inches of rain. It was between 9 and 10 inches of rain during the game, just during the time the game was played. It was a downpour. We ended up winning 6-0 over in that game. But what an unbelievable thing about the stadium too. Because of a big soccer stadium, they had the big moat there with the barbed wire fence, so people couldn't come over and storm the field.
I remember that they had a moat and a barbed wire fence, so like the fans wouldn't like for the soccer games like storm the field or like assault the players or whatever.
An exercise.
They had a trap.
In the middle of the field.
I remember that they had a hydraulic trap door that would come out of the middle of the field in case
we get down below.
Football gets crazy down in the Latin American countries.
All of a sudden, we're getting ready to play a football game, and they're showing us a way out in case we get stormed the field because they didn't like who was winning.
I remember that.
Crazy,
here's another one. Here's another one that, like, another 2 games that pop into my mind from your past and your history. 2 big-time snow games. So let's talk about those. One of them that I remember was, so you were up here, actually. So you were the defensive coordinator of the Tennessee Titans. This was 2000. It was the final game of the season. And so it was the 16th game of the season, and you were up here in Cleveland playing at Cleveland, who's a division opponent.
Chris Palmer was the head coach.
Chris Palmer was the head coach who had used to be coach with you at the Oilers. And it was a heavy snow game, that you guys won. Talk about that game.
Not only a heavy snow game, but the temperature got down to minus 26, I think, in that thing.
And wind chill,
wind chill and all that kind of stuff.
How'd you guys have to adjust in that game?
Well, the big thing was give the ball to Eddie George more.
Yeah.
And we lined up.
About 40 rushes.
About 45 rushes with Eddie George, and Steve McNair,
scrambling,
act like he was going to throw it, but he just kept it and ran it. And we beat him 26-0.
Yep. And then another one. Here's probably the most epic one that comes to my mind, and we've seen the epic snow out in Buffalo. But this one was actually on the cover of Sports Illustrated.
Yeah.
The picture of it after the game was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. But you guys' 2002 game when you were the head coach of the Bills, and you guys were playing the Dolphins.
Dave Wannstedt.
And it was like sunny-ish, but no snow at the start of the game. Yep. It started snowing in the late first quarter or start of the second quarter, and in the last 3 quarters of the game, it snowed 22 inches.
22 and a half inches in the last 3 quarters.
Talk about. What did you tell the coaches in the booth in the middle of that game?
We brought them down. They weren't up in the booth
after halftime.
Halftime told them not to go back because they couldn't see the halftime
because they couldn't see the field.
They couldn't.
So it's
see
like
the field.
There's nothing.
But you love this, Blake. One of the biggest memories of the game was when we started the fourth quarter. The entire fourth quarter, we couldn't see the Dolphins standing on their sideline, and they couldn't see us. All we could barely see was a few of the guys out there in the field. Dave Wannstedt, the heck with that. From like 8 minutes on, they just ran the clock out. They didn't want to try it, and we ended up beating them.
London Fletcher was calling his own defenses. You told London call your own defenses because we can't see as coaches.
Hand signaling, and he can't see the sideline to know what the hand signal was.
Because that was before the defensive guys had headsets,
That's right.
and so London Fletcher was having to call his own plays. I remember in that game, you guys blew the Dolphins out. This is what I remember about that. But you guys blew the Dolphins out, and Ricky Williams had like 200-something yards rushing.
Yeah.
But they had like 197 yards of offense because they had like negative 12 yards passing.
That's what they did. That's exactly
so
the number.
Ricky Williams had more yards rushing than the Dolphins, ended up with total offense on the day because of other lost yardages. And it was a crazy
3 wins.
epic
You
game.
talked about 3 weather games, but we had 3 wins. We found a way to adjust, and that's what you got to do.
No doubt. Well, hey, stick right with us because when we get back from this, we're going to do a little recap of the wild card weekend. Welcome back in to Come Get Some, and this is our wild card weekend recap. I mean, so far, Super Wild Card Weekend is definitely living up to its the wild portion of it. I mean,
is.
Not only from who the winners and losers being not necessarily who I would have anticipated going in, but then just the crazy games, the crazy weather, and the non-competitive nature of it. We finally got a competitive game out of the Rams and Lions, and that was an epic game. That was a really awesome playoff game. But prior to that game, the average margin of victory on this wild card weekend was 25 points. Was 25 points. I mean, not even close. But we've talked about the crazy Browns game. How about the Chiefs and Dolphins game? The crazy Chiefs and Dolphins game. I mean, you predicted it. You called it. We knew it was going to be freezing, and you thought it was probably going to go this way, right? But you had the number one. Going back to the Browns game, you had the number one defense in the NFL in the regular season get slaughtered, and then in this game, you had the number one offense in the regular season barely score 7 points. So talk about the Chiefs and Dolphins game.
I was very impressed with Steve Spagnuolo on the adjustments, even when they played them earlier in the year. But some of the adjustments that they did, and he was doing a great job. They were doing a great job on what we call bogey, and their bogey mechanisms, it's an 11-man disguise, how they were rocking and rolling the coverage. They were presenting things to Tua, the quarterback, and to Mike over the play caller, what people thought they were going to do on defense, but not what they were in. So you got to make the decision post-snap. I thought they did a really good job of that. And I really do believe, I thought Andy and Matt Nagy did a really good job on the things that they needed to do in all the years they've gone against Vic Fangio and designed a couple of coverage busters.
I agree.
And some big plays on that.
And for the fans out there who are wondering, like, if you go back and watch, or if you've seen any even clips out there on social media, actually Dan Orlovsky did a great job of breaking it down after the game as well too. But Spags was doing some things where he was messing with Tua's reading certain reads in that offense, like Tua's reading the safety.
Yep.
And so he would do things like he was doing screw and spin stuff, as we would call it, where hey, he's showing cover 2 and then now inserting the safety. So he was trying to show. It was like he was playing reverse psychology with Tua, showing that, oh, we're really tricking you. We're showing cover 2, but we're not able to hold our water, and here comes cover 1. And then the ball snapped,
boom,
and the 2 safeties switch.
Cross and go back to cover 2.
And go right back to cover 2. And then sometimes he would also trick, whether it was man or zone, underneath the cover 2, right? And so there was all these, like, it wasn't as simple as even – it was almost like tipping pre-snap rotation that was even then a post-snap rotation. There was multiple levels
coverage,
to it.
Press techniques, but playing zone.
Yep, no doubt. And they funny enough, like in that cold weather, they seem to catch the ball a little bit better than they've caught the ball the whole rest of the season. So maybe they just need to have hand warmers and have it be freezing. I don't know.
I agree.
But talk about, here's another one, like the shocker, right? The Cowboys in the Packers game. I'll tell you this real quick. I'll say this. We talked about Matt Burke and Bobby Slowick and some of those knowledge of Schwartz. Well, same thing. What I saw was Matt LaFleur's knowledge of Dan Quinn, and maybe a little bit of personal there, right? But people got to remember Matt LaFleur was an assistant coach for Dan Quinn down at the Falcons, having to go against that offense every day in practice, right? When Kyle Shanahan left, LaFleur didn't get promoted to offensive coordinator, so he left and went to the Titans to go be an offensive coordinator. But I saw some things right there. But talk about that game.
I agree, and there was a great knowledge. I thought Matt really did a good job game planning. But here's one of the things that Dan Quinn, who I have a lot of respect for, his matchup of personnel on the field. He played so much, and he's been used to it when Dallas gets the league, when you can play smaller, meaning that you can put 5 and 6 and 7 DBs out there. He played like 50-plus snaps of 6 or more DBs in the ball game, and they're running it right at him.
Well, and LaFleur just lined up in 12 personnel, which is 2 tight ends, 1 running back.
Yeah, and just ran the ball down their throat.
Run, play action, pass, move the pocket, the whole entire thing. Yeah, it was there could be a surprise.
There could be.
There could be
Who
a
knows?
surprise vacancy down. I mean,
Jerry still got my number.
It was it was bad. It was bad enough that it'll be surprising, especially if you say like Dan Quinn, who Jerry loves, is going to leave for potentially leave for another head coaching job. But also real quick, talk about the Rams and Lions game.
It was my favorite game of the whole week.
No doubt.
I really, really, really thought Ben Johnson did a really good job. I thought Aaron Glenn did an excellent job of what they were doing to slow down that passing game and stuff.
I thought Raheem Morris and Sean McVay did a great job as well.
I thought Raheem Morris did a fantastic job of the adjustments at halftime and coming out in the second half as he slowed them down. It was a really counter back and forth, very good coaching game. I was so proud and happy for Jared Goff. I was on that team with him when he struggled and everything. And he got a game ball in the locker room afterwards.
It was awesome. So happy for Dan Quinn, who we coached on at the Saints.
Mark Brunell's on that staff.
Mark Brunell,
Aaron
who we
Glenn,
coached,
all those
guys. So super excited for them and that region, right?
Yep.
It has that feel of like it did when we were at the Saints, right? They hadn't won in
Same
forever.
feeling.
And, a lot of that crew came from that Saints team,
staff.
and that mentality.
Yep, that's right.
Hey, but stick right with us, because when we get back from here, we're going to talk coaching carousel, talk some fit, and maybe some predictions on who will land where. Welcome back to Come Get Some, and this is going to be our merry-go-round segment, our coaching carousel segment. We know It's interesting. It's been there's been more openings since we last met on Come Get Some.
And there might be more.
And there might even be more, especially when we see what happened, down in the Dallas debacle, game. But one quarter of the league, right? 8 teams: Atlanta, Washington, Las Vegas, Seattle, the Chargers, the Patriots, the Titans, and the Panthers. One quarter of the league is open right now and looking in like you said, potentially one or two more, which is a huge year, one of the bigger years of openings, that I've seen in my time. But G-Dub, talk a little bit first of all, what goes into these head coach. You've been a head coach twice in this league. You've coached a lot of coaches on how to go about these interviews. You got about an 800-page book, very detailed book on everything from on how to interview, for a head coaching job. Talk about what goes into these, how long they last, how intensive they are. What are they like?
Well, I appreciate you bringing up the book that I put together, and I started doing that after my first set of interviews, back in early 1900s,
Early 1900s, Jesus Christ, early 1990s.
Yeah.
How old are you?
Oh, no doubt. I'm not that old, But started doing that, and all the time with all of our new staffs we have is that I tell them, if you'll put up with me for a week, now for a year, you got to put up for the entire season, then I'm going to give you this book. And we've adapted that book. We've adjusted to as the game changed and all that kind of stuff. But, yeah, it's an interesting thing, and it's interesting to see who exactly are involved in those interviews. Some of them are just maybe an owner and a GM. Some of them has got, anywhere from, director of personnel to all, or different types of finance people in there, different types of analytical people are in there. Some of them are really big. But one of the things I do think I need to say, and maybe some of these young guys will listen to this, it's also your opportunity, my opportunity when I'm interviewing to figure out whether I want to work with some of these slappies that are asking me questions. They're asking me questions about, are you kidding me? You think that's important, of going about winning a game at the top of the profession and having winning season and establishing a culture to be able to win and win and win? Some of that stuff goes on behind the scenes, and I wish I would have recorded lots of different interviews to be able to play back to people that are actually doing it. And then, obviously that very first interview is just a little bit of a tone setter, because you'll be brought back if you pass the first one into a second and into a third interview before the final decision is made. And it'll go from everything to do from practice to organization to details with players, details in working among, the different staff alignments and stuff, from equipment to trainers to football operations to scouting, all that kind of stuff. So it's a very in-depth interview if they're going to go about hiring the right person.
Yeah, on that, so hiring the right person, how, and we see this in different sports, maybe athletes, certain athletes, or maybe obviously in basketball, it's crazy how much the control the players have. But how much control should the players have, or how much should the owner listen to, especially you see things out in Las Vegas, right? So Max Crosby saying hey, if you don't make Antonio Pierce the head coach, I want to trade. How much does that, and should that hold weight, from your star player and your highest paid player, and an all-star in the league, saying that about a coach? And he's had a number of coaches come through there in his career, and this is the second time he's had been in an interim situation where hey, are they going to hire the interim guy? Versace did a great job, and so talk a little bit about that.
Well, I will tell you this: as an owner, or as whoever, as an owner, let's say as an owner, do I have a presence about me and an understanding about me that which player that I'm actually going to, ask about those type of things? I think it's important to do have player information about certain things about that. I do believe that. That's another way to collect the most important information you have on making a decision. And this is great. How many times do owners completely deflect that they're the ones that are hiring wrong people, but yet they want to blame it on the person they brought in there, and that person failed? Well, why did you hire him in the first place? What type of collecting information are you using to figure out whether a guy belongs or not? And now with Max Crosby, I'm like him. You know, Antonio did a fantastic job there, and I'm friends with Mark Davis, and now Tom Brady. If he goes into the situation out there too, you know what? They'd be ignorant, you know, to let Antonio out of there. They'd let Antonio hire his own staff and bring it in there. Give him 2 to 3 years to show him again. He is a big voice with players because they understand he's been in the arena and he's talking the way they understand.
Think about this. Think about this on that note. Look at Dan Campbell.
Same thing.
You think the Lions are happy to have Dan Campbell? You know what I mean? And I think Antonio Pierce could and would be the Raiders version of Dan Campbell.
I totally agree. You hit a home run with that one.
And on that, like a lot of people are thinking. I mean, Kevin Stefanski had a great year handling all the chaos and everything.
Coach of the year.
Coach of the year.
I'd vote him for Coach of the year.
And probably I would have as well too until that game this past weekend, right?
Yep.
And it's not necessarily just a regular season like award, right? And so I'd have to like seeing the wild card weekend as well too. I mean, I'd probably have to give it to Dan Campbell.
Yep, and Dan Campbell
And
too.
what-
But
and
then
what's happened
D'Amico
there.
Ryan on what he's done. D'Amico flipping him from worst to first,
Yep.
and now he's in it right there, and he's done a great job. But there's no doubt. I think the job that Dan Campbell has done. We both coached him. We've been in the games with him and all that stuff. Very, very proud of what he's done for the Lions.
Well, you spoke a little bit about Antonio Pierce, and so I mean, obviously, you're so in the know, you know, out there. Like, what are you hearing on like who are some legitimate candidates for some of these roles? Who's doing well in the interviews? Who do you think will get some of these roles?
Well, I will tell you this, Antonio, and I think it's great that Mark Davis and the Raiders are allowing him to do this, but they're allowing him to go around and continue to interview at other places. But I'm hearing he hit a home run at Tennessee. I was there 12 years in that organization, and there's still people in that building and everything that I'm close to and everything. But they said, wow, he did a great job there. And now, he's up there. He's interviewing with the Falcons now, okay, and also down there. And
those would be two really good I mean, the Titans and the Falcons
settings.
would be good fits for him as well, too.
No doubt about it. They'd be really good fits.
Which maybe, sometimes owners do this, right, where they want that validation of like, okay, I'm going to let him go, and, these other places want him as well, too.
Right.
Well, then that gives me more validation that this is a hot commodity. Maybe like you said, give me some – maybe Mark Davis's interview process isn't the greatest, right? So, hey, let's tap into some of these other people's interview processes, and if everybody else wants them, well,
No
then
doubt.
I'll make a superior offer.
I agree.
Do you think Harbaugh is going to be the Chargers head coach?
I do.
He's interviewing there?
He's interviewing this week there, and I think this Friday. And I think that he is the number one choice there. I think he'll do a great job there.
Where do you think Belichick's going to go?
I think that Bill's going to have some nice choices maybe at Dallas, maybe at Philadelphia. And
Places that aren't even open yet.
Not even open yet. But here's another one is that I think he is a hot commodity at Atlanta.
Hey, well, you heard it here first. It's going to be an interesting coaching carousel. It always is. But stick right with us because when we get back, we're going to give out some wild card weekend game balls. Welcome back into Come Get Some. This is our Wild Card Weekend game ball segments. We're going to give out game balls to the top performers from Wild Card Weekend. And we'll start with a twofer because we had a Spider-Man pointing meme, performance, from CJ Stroud and Jordan Love, who had literally as identical of stat lines in games as I've ever seen.
Games.
Right? Both guys went exactly 16 for 21. CJ Stroud threw for 274 and Jordan Love threw for 272. Both 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Both identical 157.2 QBRs, right? So you can't give it to one
and
without
both
the
young
other.
Quarterbacks,
and both young quarterbacks
very
making their
well
first,
prepared and making their first starts in the playoffs. That's outstanding.
No doubt. No doubt, outstanding, and we talked about
Well
how
coached.
their offensive coordinators did a great job.
Did a
We
great
get an
job.
assistant game ball to them
Yep.
on putting them in the right situations. And then our guy Jared Goff. I mean, his big performance: 277 yards and a touchdown, 121 QBR.
I loved his body language and the way he went about looking and staring people in the eye. And I was on that staff with him when we first got him at the Rams and everything. I was so proud of the game and the performance he had in that game, and he got a game ball from Dan Campbell.
He got a game ball, and Brad Holmes got a game ball.
And
Both
Brad-
guys came from the Rams. Yep.
Had been a long time with Brad.
They've put a big time. They've had a big time turnaround there, and then one of our old pay that mans. Now we're throwing him a game ball because he is probably definitely going to get paid with his blue hair and everything.
No doubt about
the
it.
sun god himself, Amon-Ra, but with his 7 receptions, 110 yards,
Big game.
and continuing to just play so tough and physical. Great leader for the Lions. Then how about Patrick Mahomes? You got to give it to Patrick Mahomes. He the way he battled. I mean, 262 passing yards, 41 rushing yards, 2 helmets. Let's see if he gets fined.
He had more restraint. He had more turbulence going on trying to get the second helmet to fit over
On his big head.
over the Dolphins defense.
Do you think the NFL is going to fine him for dropping his head like they've been fining all of these running backs?
You know what would be interesting? They better.
Or maybe they should just stop.
Just stop that one. No doubt about it. Why?
Maybe they should just stop with the crazy fines for stuff like that. And then, hey, you got to give it. They finally found a person who could catch a ball in Kansas City.
They did.
Maybe again, like I said,
know.
maybe it just was the physics of how cold it was, or something like that. Or they found some sticky stuff or whatever. But Rashee Rice, having 8 receptions for 132 or 130 yards and a touchdown. It was good to see. Great to see. I mean, so many other great performances over the weekend, but I mean, at the end of the day, like, what can you say? I mean, it was that's what wild card weekend's all about.
That's what it's about, and you got to rise up and you got to play.
So, what are you thinking, G-Dub? Are you going to send us out with a come get some?
Yes, with a come get some. Here we go. Ready, break.
Come get some.